All right, I'm going to call this meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education to order. This is our March meeting, our March regular meeting. At this time, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We begin every meeting with public comment. We have one individual signed up for public comment tonight. At this time, I call Mr. Mali for public comment.
Mali, 53 Chester Street. Good evening, honorable members. In this important global crisis of corona, we are united to continue education of our children. Lawrence Public School, under impeccable leadership by Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris, one of the best superintendents in the history of Lawrence, moving forward. Great news of accreditation of Lawrence High School make every citizen proud. Teachers and their union must know 83,000 citizens behind them in this important year for the contract. Our safety officers from Lawrence High School, especially our friend Safety Officer Millie, respectfully be asking for support of Officer Millie. In this global crisis of corona, we must unite, continue the education of our children. While there might be disruption in the education of our public children, we must be ready for the continued education. While our city stands strong and united, we support the leadership of Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris, who arrived in our city in a Columbia gas fire and crisis. Now we are witnessing the coronavirus global crisis. This great immigrant city, children of revolution of the bread and roses, will rise up to overcome this obstacle. We are united. Lawrence always unite, always strong. Contract for our teachers and support our safety officer, Millie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mali. At this time, I would ask the board to entertain a motion to add an item to the agenda. I would like to add a report from the superintendent and mayor on the coronavirus. Could I have a motion?
Moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. At this time. I would ask the superintendent and then mayor to give us a update on the status of Lawrence Public Schools' actions relative to the coronavirus.
Yeah, thank you. So LPS has developed a task force that is in daily communication as we prepare to support our schools, staff, families, and students. We are in close communication with city and state health officials and, of course, with DESE. We have canceled, in accordance to the guidance, out-of-state and international trips. We are monitoring events that we are hosting school-based. We have started a very deep cleaning sanitation process with our foggers. Those are nightly with high-touch surfaces. Those are handrails, elevator buttons, all the surfaces that are very high-touch. We have upped our supplies of hand soap. We are continuing to support our nurses and custodians with the right equipment and prepare their emergency plans. We are also working on access for food in the event that we have school closings. We're monitoring our attendance and following the guidelines by DESE. And of course, we're in close communications with our principals and our teachers and with our families.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To begin with, we just came out of a meeting directly associated with all of the players involved in having to handle the virus. It was myself, Martha Velez, our Health and Human Services Director, City Council President Vasquez, Fire Chief Moriarty, Police Chief Vask, Inspectional Services Director Armano, the Superintendent was present, Dr. Gorn, the Chair of our Board of Health, the President of Holy Family, the Emergency Management Director, Amy Hamill from Holy Family, Dr. Condilis, the ER physician director at LGH, Kim Moriarty, nurse director, Paul Brennan, the paramedic director at Lawrence General, who runs all of our ambulances, the city attorney, and various other functionaries at the different hospitals. Communication to get really basically all of the fundamental pieces of communication, of action, of concern on the table, kind of talk to each other before anything greater happens. As we get together today, the state most recent statistics show that there are an increase of 5 positive cases of COVID in Massachusetts. It brings it from 92 to 95. It's only a growth of 3 from the day before. The numbers of quarantines are up. The important number for us is that Essex County continually still only has 1 positive case. There, in that, from what we know, that 1 positive case, from what we know today, is not in Lawrence. But if you want the more updated stuff, I think the website for the state on this matter is a lot more informative. I don't want to speak out of turn. I do want to just note that we are also going to adopt the governor's executive branch restrictions. He declared a state of emergency yesterday due to this virus and offered the new guidance for the executive branch employees, and in order to prevent the spread of the virus. And as of today, I'm adopting the same directives for the city and the city employees. This guidance goes into effect immediately and will be revisited every 30 days or sooner as circumstances dictate. The city government will continue full operation and prepared to serve residents and businesses in the community as needed. At this time, members of the Lawrence Board of Health and Lawrence Public Schools are in contact with the Department of Public Health in order to stay up to date on information regarding the virus. Lawrence Public School Superintendent has shared updates with parents and community members as information becomes available, and will be posting updates on the district's website. In each school building, as she has talked about, undergoes rigorous cleaning daily to ensure that commonly touched surfaces are disinfected. School buses and vehicles bringing kids to school that we do have control over, those are cleaned, some daily and some weekly. All work-related travel, both foreign and domestic, is to be discontinued until further notice. City employees are also strongly encouraged to avoid any personal international travel. Conferences, seminars, and other discretionary gatherings scheduled and hosted by the City of Lawrence involving external parties are to be held virtually or canceled. Regular internal business shall continue, including but not limited to mandated public hearings and board meetings. Meeting organizers are strongly encouraged to utilize alternatives like conference calls, WebEx, and other group communication tools. I did issue a special executive order, allowing for remote participation in meetings like this and public hearings, including the City Council. And so that is in effect as of today. Additionally, the City of Lawrence employees should not attend external work-related conferences, seminars, or events. Alternatively, City of Lawrence employees are encouraged to participate remotely if they can. City of Lawrence employees feeling sick with fever or flu symptoms should not come into work. Information available to date regarding the virus indicates that the highest risk population includes older adults and individuals with serious chronic medical conditions. Employees in this risk group are encouraged to talk with their supervisors to review possible alternative work assignments. These actions complement additional precautions that have been undertaken in recent days, including encouraging proper self-care and hygiene, such as washing your hands, ensuring bathrooms are stocked with hand washing materials and paper products, frequently cleaning touch points such as doors, knobs, handles, elevator buttons, and common area surfaces, and making clean products and sanitizers available in all the City Lawrence workspaces, including the publishing of a flyer that's both colorful and basic to get the most basic pieces of information to people, and ensuring that we get out to all the buildings and communities that are most susceptible to the virus. For additional updates on the virus, including preventive measures, please you can also visit the Lawrence Alert Center Website, it's cityoflawrence.com. It's at the very top. You'll see it. It's a big bar. You can also go to the mass.gov 2019 coronavirus website that the state has. In an effort to ensure you have good awareness, DPH will update that stuff daily. I think all in all, the communications have been good up to date. The best information that we can are getting out to the most people. Encourage folks to keep communicating with each other, and don't forget that communication means not just talking to each other in English, it also means to do it in a bilingual manner, and making sure that everyone can access the information. And if you have to create a plan for your organization, that you have to create a plan for everyone, not just, I think that the universities are finding that they want to shut the universities down fast, but there's people that need to stick around, so they have to have plans specifically for students who don't have meals or live far and those things. So I would encourage you, as you're making decisions about your organizations and your businesses, to specifically make a plan for everyone in your organization. But I think that the schools are in good hands with Superintendent Paris and her team, the task force that she's put together, Chief Vask and Chief Moriarty, working every day with the leadership at City Hall, are ensuring that we will be safe. 3 things: they have plans for scaling for testing between the public sector and that's the administration and the public organizations and the hospitals. They have a plan for scaling testing, and they have a plan for scaling for care. If they need to grow the number of beds in the hospitals, we do have a plan for that. We have most recently had a table talk conversation with all the players where they have planning specifically for types of events like this. I'm not going to go into those details because we're not at that bridge, but suffice it to say that we are prepared for those things, even in a situation where the state and the federal government are not going to be there to help us. We will be prepared as a community to help ourselves. Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Greatly appreciate that update. I do want to give members a chance to ask any questions if they have them.
I do. I have
Julia?
a question. Thank you, Superintendent and Mayor, for that information. And I know during this discussion and the precautionary measures that have been taken into place, and I know the superintendent mentioned that there has been a task force put together. Has there been any discussion at all as to any closing of schools? And I understand that in other communities, the reason why some of the schools have closed is because of some of the students are currently on vacation at this time and probably traveled to different places. But has any of this discussion taken place in terms that if we do have to get to those measures, how are we going to continue to educate our kids remotely?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. We've had lots of conversations in the superintendent network as well as with DESE. There are some challenges for various communities in terms of access and equity. So we're very sensitive not to continue to highlight those disparities. We are not encouraging remote learning because many of our families do not have that access. And so we are very hopeful that in the event that we do have to close, it is for one day in deep cleaning. We have very good examples from my colleagues in other districts about how to do this right now. And DESE has been clear with their guidance in terms of the 180-day. We are at 3 snow days, so we still have 2 snow days that we wouldn't have to make up, so that's fingers crossed for us. But to your specific questions about remote learning, we're not going to explore that given access inequities.
In case we had to shut down, has any discussion taken place as to what we will do for the remainder of the school year?
So you're saying
We're
long-term?
hoping this will not happen.
Sure. So the question is long-term, and we haven't discussed that yet in my network and with DESE. We are on weekly calls with them, and that is definitely a scenario that we're going to be discussing. So I don't have an answer for you right now, and we're exploring, we're not the only community that has this limitation or this challenge, and we're very sensitive to that. So we want to make sure that what we're offering, or what we're thinking about planning ahead for our students and family is, it's good, it's quality, it's engaging, and that we can deliver an experience that's remote that also makes sense. So we're exploring those scenarios.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Great. At this time, I'd ask the superintendent to give her report.
Great, thank you. So on the sunny side, last week we hosted a Dancing with the Stars, which is a yearly event that we love so much. It was a fantastic performance by all of our students who are in the position of teaching our staff members. And so it was a fun-filled night with 18 acts that dazzled us with their moves. The other thing that I wanted to circle back with you all when I last met with you is the headmaster update. When I last met with you all, we were in semifinalists with 2 very strong candidates. And we moved into the finalist round, which happened earlier this week. We had performance tasks that included going to classrooms. We asked the candidates to describe what they saw, feedback that they would be offering teachers. We asked them for leadership scenarios that included scenarios that are very challenging with a teacher, with a principal, with a parent, with a student, with a community partner. We also then had them at the PAC, at our Performance Arts Center, for opening remarks and then Q&A with staff members who were very candid with some of their concerns, and they asked really good questions about our demographics and our populations. And so we're at the point of a reference checking for candidates, and we'll be back with announcements to you all shortly, we hope. Next, I wanted to circle back also with the Student Opportunity Act. To date, we have met with 11 stakeholder groups, and sampling of that includes students, families, teachers, and just today, principals. We have shared with them the information that we have in the guidelines by DESE and have done one-on-one that have been very, very robust and good conversations about what people care about, what people feel our challenges are, our needs. A flavor of that is, for example, when I met with students, and this is no surprise, as I had mentioned last night in our hearing, they unanimously really care about early college, dropout prevention. One thing that was surprising, at least to me, is that they also care about full-day preschool. An example that I shared last night was that as I was digging a little deeper and asking students, tell me more about that, one student said, my little sister got a half-day slot at one of our schools. That didn't work for my family. We had to put her in daycare. So for those reasons, I'm trying to convince my peers to vote for preschool. When I met with teachers, as an example, they were very adamant about professional development opportunities and trainings for teachers. That seems like the right thing to care about for teachers. I just met with principals earlier today. The highlights of that discussion was thinking about mental and behavioral health support for students, which would be incredibly supportive for them, including stabilization teams. And of course, they care about everything on that list, so we talked about how do you prioritize that, and that's part of this process. So we encourage you all to take a look at the feedback form. I welcome your questions and concerns or reactions to the SOA process. And just as a reminder, the next time that we meet about the SOA, we will be sharing with you a draft plan. It's going to take us a while to analyze that, so we're running pretty close to the timeline. We still have, as I mentioned, 11 stakeholder groups to meet with, compile that, get an analysis, and bring it back to you with a draft plan.
So before we go to questions on this, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping items relative to Student Opportunity Act. So one, we had a very good hearing last night, and we had 4 members and our student representative present. I know that you haven't had a chance to question yet, so I want to make sure you get that. But I just want to remind all members that we should fill out this survey, which you can fill out by hand if you want, or we will send you the online link for you to fill out online if you prefer. Then second, would just remind folks that this calendar was presented to us at the last meeting, and district has made a lot of progress on that. This is the summary sheet, and what I would just mention on the summary sheet is this is informed by the guidance from the state around ways that this money is required to be spent. And so when you go to take this survey, you want to have reviewed this and get an idea in your, get your ideas around what you think the priorities ought to be. I will say I think number one feedback we got from multiple members last night was they wanted to get a better sense of where the district was on certain things before determining priorities, and we know that's what superintendent and team will come back with prior to our meeting on the 31st. I just want to lay that is the sort of process and where we're going on SOA. All right, so at this time, open for questions relative to SOA.
Yeah, so one of the questions I have is, I would love to, if you could just provide a little more detail on how the kind of focus groups or conversations are unfolding, because the one thing I would be concerned about is when I look at this list, there are things on here, like depending on what category you fall into, you're gonna understand or have more information about some of the options more than others, right? So if you're a teacher, you might know more about certain things. If you're a community partner, you'll be concerned about other things.
Absolutely.
And if you're a parent, you might not know what some of these things even mean.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So how are we like kind of explaining what the universe of
Yep.
possibilities is for people?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked the question. We talked a little bit about this last night, which is why we think it's really important that one of us in the leadership team is having the discussion to translate this education lingo. And how that's worked so far is that we give very specific examples to each of these categories so that it gets interpreted in a way that it's accessible to every stakeholder group. So my example with the students, I had to sort of give them very concrete examples of what that would look like in our context. When I've done it with the parents, the same idea. So we feel really strongly that it has to be FaceTime with our discussion, a robust back and forth. I've encouraged people to, like earlier with the principal, I said, you should influence your peers. If this is something you care about, talk about it, because it's a different perspective. It's why we're doing these very focused groups, and so many of them and varied, because we want to hear. The other example with the LPAC, as an example, they care about something completely. So every group has something that they care deeply about. All to say, everyone cares about what's on the list, and our job is to get enough feedback to narrow it down, to do 2 to 3 things really well in this plan as outlined for 3 years. But it's the conversation and the discussion to translate, what does this mean? Because it's so broad, it's so education-heavy lingo, and we want it to be accessible. It requires one of us to be in front of the groups to do that. It's why that we designed it this way.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that, because as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, on one hand, it would be nice to get like a broader range of input by implementing this just as a survey, but I kind of feel like that it doesn't really lend itself to that because of the complexity of the information that you're asking people to sort of analyze and choose between.
Based on the experience of the 11 groups so far, it would be really challenging for folks to make a real informed decision and give us feedback if we're not answering
you're
the
not
questions
answering questions
about
and
what
having
does
a
that
dialogue.
mean? How does that
Yeah.
being really translated?
Right, okay, good. Well, I'm glad we're doing it this way then.
Other SOA questions?
Just based to follow up on the conversation between Jess and the superintendent. So since you've already put these together, is that something that can be shared with us?
You're saying the actual results so far?
Not the
Oh.
results, but the way that you've presented the questions to the students, to the different stakeholders.
I understand. So the question is, can I share how I've presented it?
Right, because you've already have, under each point, you've
I see.
had an explanation of what it is that you're looking for.
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
Right, that's the
I'm
same
happy
thing.
to give you concrete examples of all of the, is that what you're suggesting
Right.
for under each priority?
Eh,
Happy to
right.
do that.
Because it would be the same for us if we're going to
Yep,
be
happy to
looking
do
at
that.
this. Thank you.
So, John, just a question. Do you want us to, I mean, I actually feel pretty comfortable understanding most of what's on here in terms of options, maybe with a few questions, but do you want us to fill this out and give this to you or the superintendent by the end of the evening, or how would you?
You don't have to fill it out by the end of the evening. I think I don't know if there's a deadline established on it, but
Our preference is the earlier the better, so that we can start analyzing.
Yeah.
You're welcome to do it when you feel comfortable to do it, either the online version or just sending us your copy version. It's fine
Okay.
with us. And the question last night is, well, how do I identify myself because I don't see myself here? If it's okay with you, if you could just identify as a community partner, that would be okay with us.
Yeah, I mean, I could identify as a couple of different things.
That's right.
So, yeah.
So it's up to you how you want to identify, but in
Yeah.
case you don't see yourself reflected here, if
Just
it's
choose-
okay with
yeah.
you, yes.
All right.
I think the other, yes, Pat?
I just have a question as a superintendent.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that the current school committee members have received this survey, and has the superintendent received feedback from the group?
Thank you for asking the question. I personally sent out an invitation to school committee members and city council members to join us last night, tonight, and on the 31st. So they have had the same documents that I shared with you all electronically.
All right, because what I understand is that there's an urgency on the part of some school committee members to make sure their constituents are heard. And I just wanted to make sure that they had that information and were able to weigh in on the plan.
We welcome their feedback, and I was hoping that they would come to one of the meetings. The other thing that I pointed out in that note is that if they were unable to attend last night, today, or the 31st, that when I meet with them in 2 weeks, that I will be also seeking their feedback.
Great, I appreciate that, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I didn't even hear the question, but can I just chime into that too? Because the communication with the school board, I, as well, being the chair, I did make specific outreach on this matter. There has been a lot of communication about, what work the school committee will do or when they're going to meet and all those things, and all that stuff is moot because there is a set of guidelines and rules when the school committee can meet. And I'm encouraging all school board members to participate in this meeting, the meeting where most of these decisions are going to happen, and it's, I'm glad we get participation from Member Matos, who's here with us, but for the most part, it's this is the place where we have to avail of ourselves to voice the concerns of the community. And I know the superintendent and her staff sent them information, and then I sent them information too separately, just to be sure that they got the information that I got through a venue where I was communicated to by them. So I think that we've done the most we can do to communicate and keep the linkage between the school committee and the LAE board in a steady way.
All right, I want to just take a moment to note that Enrique Matos from the school committee is here. We greatly appreciate his presence. City Councilor Selena Reyes is here. We greatly appreciate her presence. Kim Berry, President of the Lawrence Teachers Union, is here. We greatly appreciate her presence as well. I want to jump back to SOA and just say, as I'm just seeing this coming down the pike here, On the 31st, we've got to meet to review the district's plan that has to go to the state for April 1st. And I think that's going to necessitate a meeting the week, though, of March 24th. And we can figure out the date later for LAE to see the plan for the first time and give questions and feedback. I don't think we want to be there on the 31st with the first chance for public comment and having a vote to approve that night.
I welcome additional meetings. I think, we were trying to get as many stakeholder
I
groups.
don't welcome them, but I think it's needed in this case.
Yeah, we were challenged by how many stakeholder groups can we meet with in the 3.5 weeks timeline that we had to compile everything, to run it by you all with confidence, to say to you all, we got a really good number of stakeholder input and we're delivering this plan to you all with that in an analysis. So just let me know what works best.
Yep. So I will, I'll circle with your team to figure out a date that will work for, to both give your team enough time and give LAE a chance to have a meeting looking at actual plan and then come back on the 31st for a final look and vote. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I would just want to say that Member Matos was actually here last night for that input as well. So, and I just, if it hasn't already been said, I think that DESE is putting on, I know DESE is getting pressure too, as we were told last night, they're getting pressure to get this stuff going, but the amount of time that they've given the school districts to spend and figure out how to spend not just the $23 million that we're going to get this year, but really create a plan for a 3-year plan, I think is, it's rushed, and I think they're going to miss voices, and I just want to be clear about that today. This is not being rushed because we want to rush it. It's being rushed because DESE wants us to rush it. And I'm not sure that it's going to get I think we're going to get a good result, but not the best result, because some people are going to feel like, hey, I didn't get a chance to speak up about it. But I think the good news is that if it does, whatever we want to get paid for doesn't make it this round, we are going to get another batch of money next year until we get to that $151 million. But it's on, and again, I don't want to disparage DESE too much, but I think they're asking too much of the district.
They're asking a lot.
To get this thing done and then get it right. And by the way, then hold our feet to it. So.
Listen, I love beating DESE up as much as the next member here, and I think we did point out some
Sorry,
legit
Ventura.
concerns on this last night, but I think Ventura's well-taken point last night, and I'm just going to say this so he doesn't need to, is that they got handed a state law 2 months ago. Or a little more.
The law requires an April 1st plan. We as a agency implement the law. We don't create
So
the law.
they're dealing with what the law tells them they've got to tell districts to implement. And it's our reality no matter what, but I get it. But so I think just to Julia's earlier point, so if we go with a meeting on the week of the 24th to get a good look at the plan, have questions answered and explained, and then come back on the 31st for final review, obviously give the district time to make modifications, changes as suggested by the board, and come back on the 31st to get a final look and vote to meet the state deadline. Does this work for members?
To meet on the 24th.
On the 24th,
I'm saying the week of the 24th.
the week of the 24th.
We may want to give them, and we can figure that out. Just to give,
There's a school committee meeting, I think, scheduled the 25th,
mhm.
just so you know.
Okay, so we go with the 24th or the 26th? And remind you that we've got to come back on the 31st to vote.
I can do, I mean, if we're going to start getting into the nitty-gritty of scheduling here, like, I can do the 24th or the 26th, but it would have to be, I couldn't do it at 6. I'd have to do it at 5. I don't know if other people could make that.
You're saying the 25th or the 26th?
No, I can't do the 25th at all.
I think we have to do the 24th or the 26th. School committee meets on the 25th.
I don't have a problem either date with 5 o'clock either, so.
The Lawrence Promise Program, I have a conflict, but I can come late. I don't have to be there right at the beginning.
That's what?
That's the fund that we put.
No, but is that on the 26th?
That's on the
That's on the
26th.
26th.
Yeah, the 24th I can do.
Can you do
I
the 24th?
can do the 24th at
Yeah, I can do
5.
the 24th.
Yeah, the 24th.
All right,
Then-
I'll
and
be
then-
in.
Then we're voting on the 31st.
Yeah, we're voting on the 31st. I'll be in touch with folks today to confirm the 24th or the 26th. I also want to confer with Superintendent Paris's team. They're under great pressure here to get this plan done, and I want to give them every minute we can give them, so.
Yeah, the only challenge for us is that, as I just mentioned, we're trying to get as many stakeholder groups. We're still meeting with stakeholder
Yeah.
groups that week, so we're happy to bring you what we have with the understanding that, I don't know that we'll have a few of the stakeholder groups that we'll still be meeting with.
Yep. So I will loop back on the 24th or 26th, and I will close that loop this week. But I just want to talk to Superintendent Paris's team as well to get a sense of the time they need. Any other final questions or comments on SOA?
I actually just had a quick one for Cynthia. I don't think at the partnership meeting on the 28th that we got to discuss this, did we? Am I misremembering?
No, you're absolutely right, so that's,
Okay.
we didn't get on that agenda quick enough.
Okay, so let's talk after, because there's an exec committee meeting coming up, and we might at least be able to
Great.
horn in on that one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Superintendent, school calendar?
Great. So we're circling back to the school calendar. When we shared it with you all last month, I mentioned that this is an exact replica of last year. Of note here is that students' first day of school will be August the 31st. That's right before the Labor Day weekend. We're sensitive to the fact that our school's infrastructure can't handle heat waves. And as a reminder, 2 years ago, we started school with half days because we had 90-degree weather in August. So we're sensitive to that. The other thing to highlight in this calendar is that the first day for our students in preschool and kindergarten is now September the 2nd. That is also earlier than we would normally start our kindergartners and preschoolers. We're sensitive to equity issues here. The challenge has been that our families who have younger students and then school-aged children have one student at home and waiting a whole week before the other student can start. We think that creates, again, inequities. So with that sensitivity, we moved our kindergarten preschoolers not on the same day as other students, but just a few days later. And lastly, the same half days that you all looked at last year are here, similar breaks in between, and of course, official holidays.
Questions, comments on the student calendar?
And these, the issues that we had before with the EMOs and, are they taken care of? And is this something that the teachers union also had chimed in on?
Yes, so we had shared this with union leadership, who gave us a favorable endorsement. We have connected with our EMOs and the principals who have requested additional days for professional development, and those were all part of the school planning process.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the schedule as presented.
Second?
We have a motion to accept the 2020-2021 student family calendar as presented. It's seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And, Joan, when we have a telephonic vote, we've got to go roll call, right? Okay, so at this time, I'm going to ask Joan to read the roll call. A yes vote is in favor of accepting the calendar as presented.
Mayor Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Severio,
Yes.
Ms. Andors,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Mariano?
Yes.
And Mr. Conley?
Yes. I need you to call the name of our member who's not present.
Oh, sorry. Ms. Custodia Laura, absent.
Good. So can you confirm that we have 6 in favor,
6 in favor.
0 opposed?
Yep.
Great. Motion passes. The calendar is approved. All right, at this time, I'm going to move to the report of the chair. And we're going to focus on turnaround and earned autonomy. And it's what I can tell you at this point. We have had 2 meetings of the Joint Steering Committee. We met this morning for our second meeting. I think both meetings have been productive. And we had the consultants present at both meetings. Today, CPRL, who is overseeing the earned autonomy framework, reported that they are well into their stakeholder engagement process. They have met with 25 different parties across the district to get feedback, and they continue gathering that feedback. I have asked CPRL and Great Schools Partnership, both consultants, to come to our April meeting to brief everyone on stakeholder engagement, which should be largely complete at that point, and we should be then moving into the drafting of the actual turnaround plan renewal and earned autonomy framework. So I've asked them to come back in April to brief you directly, get your questions directly. I can tell you they've briefed the Joint Steering Committee this morning. CPRL, I think, is well on target relative to earned autonomy framework. I think Great Schools Partnership is really just beginning its stakeholder engagement. We identified through feedback from the family representative on the Joint Steering Committee some concerns around this. I think we are addressing them right now to make sure that we are getting a broad cross-section of families and students who will be interviewed and participate in small group discussions and focus groups for this. And we're trying to make sure not only do we get a broad cross-section across high school, middle, elementary, and early ed, and would say that we hope to have 3 categories of students included in that, including elementary students. We heard from one principal on that today, and families at each one of those levels. But then to also make sure that we're talking to a number of English learners within that, and students with special needs, 2 of the subgroups that have consistently been identified as facing the greatest challenges in school and in Lawrence as well. So we are making efforts to make sure that that happens. But I will just say that where I feel like earned autonomy engagement is ahead of schedule, I think we're just at the kickoff point for turnaround, but hopefully by the time we get to the April meeting, we will be caught up in getting a report on full engagement. I will also say within this that thanks to Jess Anders, our consultants have been given a pretty good map of how to get to families and students, or a very good map of how to get to families and students. It's up to them to now make sure they do that. But that was all courtesy of Jess really spending time with them and mapping out, you got to talk to this group and this group and this youth group and ask this person to get to that youth group. And I think that's going to go a long way toward getting us to that cross-section. That's, from my vantage point, chairing the Earned Autonomy Subcommittee and co-chairing the joint the Joint Steering Committee. Jess, I don't know if you want to add anything relative to turnaround subcommittee.
Sure. I think it might be useful to just provide some detail on, so Pat and Noemi and I have been working together to connect great schools to different groups in the community, and what we've focused on, so LPS is supporting great schools and reaching out to certain groups of, they're going to hold some focus groups of parents and students in particular, and teachers in particular. And so in addition to that, we've connected great schools with CPAC, which is the Special Education Parents Advisory Committee. They'll be meeting with them later this month. We've connected them with, there's a parents leadership group out of LCW that's taking a leadership development class. They'll be meeting with them later this month. Then there's a variety of different community groups who they're meeting with, not just as community partners, but because those are connections to other groups of youth or parents. So we've connected them to the YMCA, Groundwork Lawrence, the Boys and Girls Club, Elevated Thought, and a couple of others that are escaping my memory right now. And I know they've made actual connections with some of those, and we'll be meeting not just with the community partners, but with some of their youth and parent constituents. We've connected them with members of the state delegation and city council for meetings. Pat's connected them directly to the school committee, and I believe those meetings are getting set up and underway. And there's a couple of other kind of broader community meetings that they're getting connected to. So I think it's churning into place. It's taken them a little bit longer, but they're getting there. The only concern I have about all of this is like how the coronavirus thing is going to play out, and whether, you know, we're all going to be like, we can't have any gatherings, large gatherings of people. But until we get to that point, our plan right now is to proceed with all of this and have plenty of hand sanitizer available.
And I would also just thank you, Jess, as well, because based on the calendar that Great Schools presented during the steering committee today, I saw Friday's a call with school committee members who want to talk with them, as well as city council members. On Friday, there's another date set for state delegation members. So we have reached out to all elected officials as well. I also know they've talked with the Lawrence Partnership.
Yes, that's another, we've connected them with that so that they can talk with major for-profit and nonprofit employers in the city. So I think that that'll be good. And there was and we did talk on the update call today. John, I think you had to get off it before we had this conversation, but I just wanted to make sure that the teachers union was also being sufficiently involved in the process, and so received assurances from the LPS folks on the phone that Kim Barry's been involved in these conversations and is connecting them to groups of teachers as well.
I know that there's a teachers meeting scheduled this week as well on Thursday. We talked to Kim at the steering committee, and there has been contact with LTU by CPRL as well. So and Kim is on the steering committee. So, you know, I hope as we progress, we are always, you know, mindful of making sure our teacher voice is heard loud and clear in this. So, questions, comments, anything relative to turnaround or earned autonomy? Jess, we're going to require you to leave this meeting if you cough like that again.
I'm so sorry. It's really just a cold. I do not have coronavirus.
Any questions or comments? Julia, would you like to come sit next to me?
For the record, Julia is too young to be affected. She is not in the target age
right,
group.
I'm
She's
not.
way too young.
I'm not.
Wipe down this microphone when I'm done, though.
Questions or comments on turnaround or earned autonomy?
I have a comment, just kind of related to this, but maybe it's more relevant to SOA. And Mayor, this may have been getting to a comment you were making, or at least the way I interpreted the comment yesterday, which is, you know, the law for SOA calls for the plans to be developed by the superintendent in consultation with, you know, in this case, the LAE and community stakeholder input. So I really appreciate all the input that is being sought. One thing I think I heard you say yesterday, Mayor, is that and I agreed with was like, I'd be very interested, once all the input is collected, what you all as the educators, with the data and the sort of the historical knowledge and current knowledge of the current turnaround plan, the past one, the future, what you all think. I mean, I just want to underscore, like, that's really important to me as well. And one thing that you all have done, which seems minor, but I just want to appreciate, is that you've situated all of these evidence-based practices, which again, a lot of these come from the law, but you've situated them within the priorities that you already have as a district, as opposed to saying, here are all these things now, like, how are we going to do them? The way I read this is, we have priorities. This is how these things support our priorities. And I think just similar to that, the input specifically around the evidence-based practices is critical, and so I applaud the work that you're doing, and like everyone, like I've heard here, like just, continue to support more and more engagement. But again, there is also a lot of work that I know you all have done to get input about the direction of the district, feedback from stakeholders, be it as part of the turnaround plan process. I mean, we did something for the superintendent search process where we asked for people's, perspectives and things. And at the end of the day, I think, again, just to underscore and agree with what the mayor was saying, I'll be very interested how you all take all of that and then make sense of it, given you're rooting it all in the current performance of the district, what you think is going to need to support, and really at the end of the day, serve our students who are not succeeding as well. But just to underscore, like, we'll be looking for you to make sense of this and root it in data and really present to us what your plan is in terms of working with your team for all this work and how to move the district forward.
Yeah, the plan will continue to be thoughtful about the data of our subgroups as with the guidance. And as I've underscored many times in the past 2 days with you all, to ensure that we're being thoughtful about the feedback that we're receiving under our priorities over a 3-year plan. As I was sharing with the principals today, this is not our one chance only. This is going to be rolled out in 3 years, and as we expect, we have 7 years of this additional funding, but we want to be really strategic about how we use the first infusion of it.
Yeah, I want to just chime in on this, because I did say that yesterday, and I think having the subject matter experts basically triage what we all think is important, I think that helps us. And again, knowing, like she just said, about the, having another bite at the apple next year and then another following year. But, the things that are of most need, even though we all think one thing is important and that becomes a high priority, it might not be the thing that is of most need, but it's something that we need to do in the 3-year plan. And I think that, we should not kid ourselves that if we all as a community think that, we need to do X, Y, and Z. Now, I think that, and they come back and say, well, really what we've been seeing is actually Y is more important than X, and you got to put that in that order. As long as they come with substantive stuff to support that, say, hey, look, what we saw is this, that we should definitely follow their lead. I think that will happen.
I wanted to say thank you to all the committee for really focusing on engagement. Personally, I believe that engagement for students and faculty is one of the most important things. And the only question that I have for the turnaround plan and earn autonomy will be when are we going to see these programs being implemented in our school system?
You want to take that, or you want to?
Yeah, so I think there's probably, the short answer is about process, like when you all will get to see the actual, I would say, summary of the current process. I think that's coming up very soon. Both deadlines will be in front of you in terms of summary from our consultants in our June meeting. And then to your question about like when will I see sort of this implementation, it's going to be combined with the SOA, so that's the nice thing about this parallel process, which is I think what Ventura was highlighting also. And so implementation of these initiative and priorities that are going to be embedded into the plan will start as soon as this summer. and then, of course, into the fall, winter, and so on. So we'll be very strategic and keep you all up to date in terms of the implementation of things.
And I would mention the intent, the hope, and really the need is for us to vote in June. And with the earned autonomy framework, which I think should be a reflection of the turnaround plan priorities and the priorities for SOA, the earned autonomy framework should give a community rating for each school on an annual basis that in many ways will identify how well we're doing at meeting the community priorities. Okay.
So actually, to follow up on Joseph's remark, I think we should figure out a way at the LAE meetings over the coming year, maybe it's on a quarterly basis, to have some kind of check-in about, so once we have, the priorities identified through both the SOA process and the turnaround and earned autonomy processes, let's have a little dashboard or something so that we can come back together and be like, okay, we said these 3 things are important. What progress have we made towards implementing that? I think that would be really helpful on a regular basis.
I like that idea. I'm a fan of linking everything, including them being part of my goals.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to include that as well, so that keeps us on track.
Yeah.
And then I can come back to you all with mid-year summaries and reviews along the way.
That would be great.
I'd also just add that different examples I've seen from other districts who have done this, and they can look really different district to district, but they do build in quarterly and mid-year reports, and do a pretty good job of spelling out what can be known at those points and that we should be looking at. So I think it's a great idea as well. Any other questions, comments on turnaround plan or earned autonomy? I guess the one other piece of business I would just want to mention here is as we move out of SOA, we're going to move into budget season. And we have 2 hearings set in April for budget review. So at this point, I want to designate a budget subcommittee. And I will just say, I'm open and willing to have anyone on it. Anyone can participate in the budget hearings, but just following last year's model, I'm going to appoint myself, Mayor Rivera, and Pat Mariano on the budget subcommittee. I am also willing at this time, if there's anyone else who would like to participate as a formal member of the budget subcommittee, I'm happy to put anyone on there and just say, again, it will be these 2 budget hearings in April. But all members are open to attend those meetings, ask questions, all of that, and ultimately everyone has a vote on the budget. Okay? I'll leave that.
Thank you for not putting me on that.
Well,
John, I think I participated on that last year, so I'm willing to participate again.
That's great. So I will add Julia to the budget subcommittee, and then in the spirit of making sure that we have an odd number on the committee, I'm going to also appoint Ventura. Because I don't want Jess angry with me. I'm more afraid of her than you, Ventura. All right. At this time, we have minutes from our regular meeting on February 12th. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes on February 12th?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second? The motion is before us. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those. All right, we're going to roll call that. Second was Julia.
No,
Oh,
I
Jess.
moved.
Member Severia moved it and I seconded it.
And Mayor seconded. And can we call the roll?
Mayor Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Severia,
Yes.
Ms. Andrews?
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Mariano?
Yes.
Ms. Custodia Laura? Absent. And Chair Conley?
Yes. I just want to confirm that's a vote of six in the
Six.
affirmative and none in the negative, one absent.
One absent.
Great. Any final comments, questions, or anything any members would like to address? At this time, Chair would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Let's call the roll.
Mayor Rivera?
That's okay, Pat. Pat, we're glad you're here.
Yes.
Ms. Severio?
Yes.
Ms. Andrews?
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez? Ms. Mariano?
Yes.
Ms. Custodia Laura? Absent. And Chair Conley?
Yes.
Six.
Confirm 6 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, 1 absent. At this time, we are adjourned. Thank you.